right. Thank you, Xavier. He's going to run our slides for us today. So we are here today to talk about the PK-3 math and literacy cycles for the performance assessment for the coming year 25-26. We'll start with some introductions. Um, our colleagues, Adam Ibrahim is our Chief Deputy Director, and Juliet Wallleitner is a special consultant supporting the CalTPA and the RDI work group, and she works under the Office of Policy and Continuous Improvement. They might be joining us today. My name is Julie Holmes. I'm one of the consultants on the performance assessment team. I've been specifically working on the PK-3 math cycle, as well as the CalTPA operational versions. And I'm joined by my colleagues. So I'll let them introduce themselves. We'll start with you, Heather.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Heather Kennedy. I'm another one of the consultants over in performance assessment. I spend a lot of time with our ed specialist groups across all of the credential areas, but I've also been working on our new literacy performance assessment that is replacing the RICA at the end of this month across all credential areas, including PK-3. So I'm happy to share that information with you all today. And I'll turn it to Marissa.
My name is Marissa Luna Lopez. I am just about to hit my 1 year anniversary with the commission as a consultant. But before that, I was a program coordinator, and I actually was on the PK3 work group when the credential was being put together. Goodness, back in 2022 or something of that nature. But yeah, and I support both teacher performance assessment and administrator performance assessment. And we are also joined by our colleague Xavier. Is he on the next slide or is he? Nope, not yet. Let's go ahead. Xavier, would you mind
Yeah,
introducing yourself?
please introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Xavier Webb. I'm a senior area director with Pearson, and we're the technical contractor that supports the development and operations of the performance assessments in California. So we work very closely with the CTC on all of that. Just happy to be here today and share information about the PK-3 transitions and be a part of this team.
Thank you. Thank you all. So we'd like to welcome you all. This is a great community, and thank you for being here. So go ahead and please introduce yourself in the chat, put your name and institution, and if you, any other information, share your location if you'd like. But go ahead and let's open up our chat feature so we can see who's in the room. Great. Welcome, everyone. All right, while you take a moment to do that, I'll go over our meeting norms. I see some familiar faces and names. It's great to have you all here. Um, yes, please unmute when you have a comment or a question. We want to hear your questions. We've kind of incorporated a few pause breaks throughout the presentation, so we will be stopping and sort of taking questions at different intervals. But please unmute and let us know what's on your mind. Keep questions to a general focus. If they're, candidate related or something very specific, that's something that we could address over email. This is hard for me, but avoid multitasking throughout the webinar. We've got a lot of information to go over today, and some of it's a little bit technical, and we want this information to be very clear because this will really help you prepare for the coming school year. We will honor your time, but so just moderate your questions and comments, and if you would like, set your screen to speaker view. That's at the top right screen so you can see. All right. Let's talk about our agenda for today. We've got a lot to cover. This might look like a little bit, but it's a lot. First, we're going to talk about the program coordinator role. This is a new assessment. This is a new credential. Many new programs are just launching, so we want to make sure that we know who the coordinator is so that we can reach out and the coordinator serves as a liaison, so we want to be able to know who to contact with questions. We will go over a draft of the upcoming math cycle for the new year, and we'll have a draft of the literacy cycle to show you. we will present you with the TPE matrix for those 2 cycles, and we'll talk about some program implementation ideas. We have some very key information about what's on the horizon, key dates, and things like that, as well as some program supports, how we will stay in touch with you throughout the fall and be presenting information to programs and candidates. And we have a resource folder for you. So we'll put the link in the chat here in just a moment. But we've got some great information in there. So we've got a backwards planning map and a literacy cycle planning map. These are doc files so that you can download them, you can make a copy, and you can tweak it and make it your own for your program. It's a suggested timeline. This is not, this is meant so that you can take it and you can adjust it to fit your program. So those are in there. We also have a copy of the video edit letter about video edits for the TPA, some information about the CalTPA as an embedded assessment, as well as the program coordinator role and the web page links. So we've got some more literacy cycle resources, math cycle resources, and then following this presentation today, we will put a copy of this presentation. So after the presentation, we will add that to the Google Drive folder. So hopefully you can get in there and start peeking around at those resources. But those are for you to share, and hopefully you find those helpful. So why are we here today? Well, PSA 2506, hopefully you saw that. That recently came out, I think, in early May. And this particular PSA applies to PK-3. This is the update on the teaching performance assessment for the PK-3 credential. So kind of in a nutshell, this PSA eliminated the option for PK-3 credential candidates to use the multiple subjects TPA if they are enrolled on or after July 1 of 2025. So beginning this July 1, PK-3 candidates must take an approved PK-3 TPA. Now, at this time, neither the Ed TPA or Fresno, who runs the FAST program, have an approved performance assessment model. So at this time, the CalTPA is the only one that has an approved PK-3 credential CalTPA performance assessment model. Okay, let's talk about the program coordinator. Heather, I'll turn it to you.
Thanks, Julie. So one of the things that will be new for everyone with this new credential area and the performance assessment model is having a program coordinator in place for the CalTPA or for the performance assessment. And they're really your primary contact with the commission related to all things performance assessment, especially as we move out of the transition type webinars and into the program coordinator meetings next year. And that person is responsible for getting all of the information from the commission out to all of the appropriate people within your prep program. We have gone through this transition with our mild, moderate, and our extensive support needs programs a few years ago, about 3 years ago when those assessments launched. And there is, some programs choose to have the same coordinator across all of their credential areas to have a single point of contact for single subject, multiple subject ed specialist. Some choose to have different coordinators for CalTPA for all their unique programs that they have. It's really up to what best serves the institution, the size of your program, things like that. So we definitely, just suggest that you think about what's going to work best for your individual program and how you want to communicate and collaborate with one another. And the person in the coordinator role for CalTPA also provides some guidance related to the way that CalTPA is integrated into the program and into the curriculum. around faculty training and support for CalTPA, making sure that candidates are placed in clinical practice that allows them to successfully complete the requirements in the performance assessment, working with those cooperating teachers and mentor teachers and the supervising teachers, the field supervisors, to make sure that there's training and support and understanding around the performance assessment there. And then also providing the candidate with the supports that are outlined in Program Standard 5 around acceptable supports, and then what are required, and then what are the things that we're not allowed to do to support candidates. So there are some other things that you can do to prepare to get ready for this operational launch with PK-3 going operational. As Julie mentioned, the math cycle was approved by the commission at the April meeting, and we are presenting the literacy cycle for approval in June. And also asking the commission to set a passing standard for the first year of usage. So the June meeting will be a really big meeting for performance assessment. So we definitely anticipate a lot of positive outcomes at that meeting. And in order to plan to get ready for the fall, some items you might want to start thinking about are program policies around, the fees for TPA. Unfortunately, the fee waiver went away about a year ago, I think, for TPA. What would your policies maybe be around remediation and retakes for the TPA? There are some items on the CalTPA website that might be able to help you with those, and in program. It's not Program Standard 5 for PK3 though. See, that's what I keep saying, and that's not what the number is for you guys. Oh my goodness. Marissa, do you remember what it is? Okay, it might be
Not
6.
off the top
I
of
think
my
it's
head.
offset
I'm
by one
sorry.
number. I know. Sorry, I was only asking because I know you were on the work group.
Yeah.
I think it's offset by one number. I will look it up. I'm sorry. I just say 5 out of habit because that's what it is for education specialists. And I'm so sorry that I just misspoke about that. But there is information in the program standard for performance assessment around retakes and remediation and what's required to support candidates. There is an option that you can work with our contractor with evaluation systems. That's what Xavier is here from, to purchase what are called vouchers for candidates to complete the TPA. And that gets rolled into their cost of tuition or fees within the university. What's nice about that is that it can be accounted for within their financial aid package, as opposed to the candidate paying for the performance assessment separately. And what happens is the university buys a certain number of voucher codes, and then the codes are provided to the candidate to register. Thank you, Marissa. Standard 6. Okay, so it is offset by one number. And so if you're familiar with working with us through a field test, candidates were provided with vouchers. So it's a similar type of alphanumeric code that they're given, except these are ones that the educator prep program has purchased from evaluation systems. Also, things to think about are clinical practice placements that are going to align with the cycle requirements. So remembering that the math cycle can be completed in any PK through 3rd grade setting, but due to the requirements of Senate Bill 488 for literacy, that would need to be completed in TK through 3rd grade. PK setting is not aligned with what is required within the literacy cycle. So that is something to consider as you go about planning your clinical practice and your course alignment. And also establishing a type of a system to communicate with faculty at the placement sites to communicate for CalTPA, and meeting with your faculty, your cooperating teachers, anybody who's working with candidates to clarify the expectations around performance assessment and who will be responsible for what type of support, and establishing some type of schedule for training and professional learning related to this area. And then a few last items. We talked about this a little bit, but thinking again about the tuition and fees and vouchers, remediation and retakes. what that looks like. And then you'll want to establish who is going to be your report contact for results analyzer. You may already have some people at your in your program who are receiving scores for candidates because you might have a multiple subject program, an ed specialist program, a single subject program. But if you want to add a specific person for PK-3, that's something you may want to start taking care of. And then we will also be holding a new coordinator meeting in the fall. So if you're new to this role and you're going to be the coordinator for PK-3, we will do a little half-day orientation to the role to give you some more specific information about what really these roles and responsibilities look like, to kind of get you onboarded into that position. And I think we'll be able to provide that date at the end of this meeting and how to register for that. And in order to update your information for the coordinator role, you can do that in ADS. So the security delegate is usually somebody in an administrative type position within your institution. So it's usually a dean or some other type of administrator. And they can add and designate people who are in charge of performance assessment. So you'll want to make sure that that person is updated for PK-3. And we have added in the chat how to, I'm sorry, I have like a frog in my throat right now. So how to add and update the performance assessment model and program contact for your specific area in the chat. And I believe I'm turning it back over to Julie to talk about the math cycle.
Thank you. Thanks, Heather. Okay, so what we are all here for, to learn about the PK-3 math cycle as well as the literacy cycle. The math cycle was based off of cycle 1, and it is learning about children and planning a math activity. And it was approved at the April commission meeting for this particular cycle. And what kind of led to the change for converting cycle 1 to the math cycle was some legislative changes. We have Senate Bill 488, which you might be familiar with, which restructured the reading competency requirement, and that shifted the RECA assessment into performance assessment. So your candidates moving forward that are taking the new literacy cycle will not have to take the RECA exam. The RECA exam is sunsetting as of July 1. There was also the adoption of TPE 7, Effective Literacy Instruction for All Students. So Domain 7 affected all the credential areas, and it added additional elements to measure within performance assessment. So this brought about the change for the redevelopment of Cycle 1 and Cycle 2. And if we look at our next slide, we'll talk about the field test. So throughout the past year, we've been conducting a field test of the new PK-3 CalTPA performance assessment. So it began last, August of 2024, where CTC staff and an expert advisory work group panel came together to revise what was Cycle 1 and to incorporate the new TPE for TPE 7 for effective math instruction in a PK-3 setting, and incorporate those TPE elements into an appropriate assessment that would be suitable for PK-3 candidates. This will go operational this August, and we'll talk about some dates later on in the presentation. And the field test was conducted throughout the fall of 2024, as well as we had an extended field test throughout this past spring. We had additional candidates. So in total, we had about 54 PK-3 candidates. We're very grateful for the 3 programs that had just received their approval to launch their credential program, and they were able to move around some coursework so that their candidates could participate in the PK-3 math cycle. That gave us some great data on the assessment and the revisions that we need to make moving forward for our launch in August. And we presented the fall field test results at the April commission meeting, and we will take the extended PK-3 spring field test data and information and present that at the upcoming June meeting. So we're going to go through step by step of the math cycle so that you know what to expect. This will hopefully help you as you're planning coursework or redesigning, um, you know, structure of your program and how and big items that will help you know how to better support your PK-3 candidates in the program. So in step one, planning of the CalTPA, there is a math focus. It is the math cycle. So candidates will be developing one play-based, UDL-focused math activity that leverages the children's assets, cultural and or linguistic, and or their interests. So that is the big focus of this cycle. Also, the other emphasis will be on developing academic language in math. So, how the candidates are preparing their children that they're teaching and preparing them and prepping them with that academic language. We'll give you some examples in a couple slides of what we're talking about. Now, the math state standards, this really depends on the candidate's clinical placement. If they are in a preschool or a TK setting, they must use the Preschool Transitional Kindergarten Learning Foundations, the PTKLF. Now, if they are in a K through 3 setting, they will be using the California Common Core state standards for math. And we have links to these resources as well. That's also in your Google folder. Now, what is unique? Whether they're using the PTKLF or they're using the California Common Core, either way, candidates select a content, strand, or standard, and they select a math practice. They will use those two things to then create their unique learning goal of what their children will learn and be able to do. So there is that integration of content and practice. And the practice, we'll look at this in a minute on a Venn diagram, but the practice is interesting because it supports the content and how the candidate is going to be utilizing that throughout the lesson. We do have sort of detailed examples in the upcoming new assessment guides as well. In step one, candidates are selecting 3 focused children. So we want to see how they differentiate instruction. With their first focused child, they're planning math adaptations for a child who needs additional support with their academic language development. And we'll just call that ALD. So we'll just get used to ALD, academic language development. Focus child 2, they're planning math adaptations for a child who requires additional support in math. They're just having some trouble. They have some gaps in their knowledge, some misunderstandings. So this is that child who just needs some extra support. And their focus child 3, they're planning math adaptations that will adapt the environment to support a child's well-being. So this is a child maybe in their class that is just kind of struggling and needing some additional social and or emotional support. A child that's on your mind, they're going through a tough time, and so some adaptations are needed in order to support them in accessing the content. And for all of the focus children, candidates plan how their adaptations will build and really access and leverage those children's assets, their cultural and or their linguistic assets and or their interests.
See. All right, so sorry. So focus children 1, 2, and 3.
I'm
Oh,
back.
Julie,
I'm
you're
here.
back. Okay.
I don't know what happened. I got kicked off.
Yeah, you froze for a second. I thought it was my computer, and then I saw someone else move, and I was like, oh, okay.
Oh, sorry
So,
about that. I'm
no, we'll go ahead and
on
go.
your toes. Okay. So I think I left off on all 3 focus children. Is that where I left? Okay, good. Sorry about that. I've never had that happen before. So for all 3 of your focus children, The candidate is planning how those math adaptations build on and leverage the children's assets, cultural and or linguistic and or their interests. So I know that's a lot of and ors. It could be one of those, it could be two of those, it could be all three. We are just asking the candidates think about how they're leveraging their children's strengths and what they bring to the classroom and how they can build on that. So let's look at the evidence table. Again, this is a draft. So this is still a work in progress, but we feel comfortable enough to come forward and show you the framework of what we have planned for PK-3. So in step one, this is a lot of planning. This is a big part of the process of the CalTPA process. Think of this as, you know, the pre-observation process where the candidate is planning all that they are going to be doing and teaching. So we want the candidates working closely with their cooperating teacher or their mentor or their supervising faculty, gathering and looking at that contextual information about their children in their class. They're planning instruction based on the children that are in front of them. So we really want them to showcase how they've gathered and how they know and what they've learned about the children that they're teaching. Then they will select those 3 focused children that we talked about earlier to develop a play-based, UDL-focused math activity that leverages children's assets, cultural and or linguistic and or interests. That includes 2 goals. So now they have 2 goals to write. One is a math content and practice learning goal, and one is a math academic language goal. We'll talk about that too in a minute. They will provide an explanation of their adaptations for their 3 focus children and provide those and upload those key instructional materials and resources that they're using for their math activity. You will notice in PK-3, we refer to the kiddos as children, not students. This was something that the design team felt very strongly about. And you will also notice that we say activity instead of a lesson. This is another point of interest that the design team felt very strongly about. So we were, so if you've kind of picked up on that lingo, that is a big change if you're used to dealing with maybe the multiple subjects and or other various CalTPAs. So the evidence in step 1 plan is very similar to what was in the older version of maybe the multiple subjects, if that's kind of your point of interest. But in part A, again, they're still doing a narrative of the contextual information of the group of children that they're teaching, as well as the 3 focused children. In part B, that is the math activity that they have developed. Now, candidates can opt to use the template that we have provided, the Part B template, or they could use their locally provided format. So if you, the program, have designed a lesson activity, lesson plan template that you would prefer your candidates to use, that is fine for Part B. We just ask that you also look at our template and make sure that there's alignment between the 2 so that the candidate is not missing something that would otherwise hurt them in scoring. So make sure that you've looked at what we have as you prepare and create your own, then that's fine to use. Part C is a big one because this step is all about planning for those 3 and differentiating for those 3 focused children. So part C is where they really get into depth about the adaptation or adaptations, could be one thing, could be multiple, that they're designing for their 3 different focused children. Sometimes candidates will just cut and paste and use the same adaptation for each of the focused children. These are different children. These are unique. So we are looking for different adaptations of how they're going to support each of those children that are in their class. And in part D, they are uploading their screenshots, explanation of their resources and materials. So that's the big picture of step 1 plan. There are 4 rubrics, 4 essential questions in step 1 planning. So this is almost half of the assessment because the assessment is 8 total rubrics. So right here in step one, this is half of it. So candidates will need a lot of support in throughout this step in really setting them up for success for the rest of the TPA. So I won't read all of these to you, but I'll give you the big picture. In rubric 1.1, they're collecting all of that information. They're explaining their math activity, talking about how it's play-based, how is it UDL, and how are they leveraging the children's um, assets, as well as monitoring their instruction, their progress in a safe environment. 1.2 is all about Focus Child 1. 1.3 is all about Focus Child 2 and the adaptations, and 1.4 is all about Focus Child 3 and the adaptations and their learning needs. So just kind of big picture to kind of set you up for how this is structured. All right, let's move on to step 2. This is the teach and assess portion. So candidates can and have the option to submit between 1 and up to 3 clips, totaling no more than 15 minutes. So candidates have the option to submit a 10-minute clip, a 3-minute clip, and a 1-minute clip. That's 14 minutes. It doesn't have to be 15 minutes either. Just as a point of reference, it cannot go over 15 for all 3. So candidates will submit clips reflecting the following: their active math children in their active math learning content and the math practices that they're utilizing, their math academic language development, and how they're monitoring children's math thinking and their language development. And this is all outlined in the assessment guide, but just to give you, kind of that sneak peek. Now, candidates will also write a commentary. Well, I say write, hold on. They will provide commentary that explains their instructional choices that we're seeing in the videos that they have selected. Now, another choice point, the commentary can be written, it could be verbal, or it could be American Sign Language, ASL. It depends on the communication preference of the candidate. If writing is their preference, great, a written narrative is fine. If they are a wonderful kind of verbal speaker, they can turn on their camera and record their commentary to the camera. Just authentically speaking to the camera and explain their 3 video clips and their choices, and just illustrate what's happening in the video clips. So that we think, and this really, went over really well in the field test. We've been testing this out, and candidates really liked having these different choice points. Yes, there is a time for the verbal commentary. In fact, right on the next slide, it'll be on there. So here's the evidence table for step 2, where they record the whole math activity, they select 1 up to 3, and they provide that commentary. And so the 2 pieces of evidence for step 2 is part E, where they upload their video clip or clips. And in part F, the commentary can be up to, my eyes here, 8 pages or up to 10 minutes of a verbal or American Sign Language commentary. So they have quite a bit of time to kind of authentically talk to the camera and upload that recording as well. Thank you. Great question. So here are the 2 essential questions. In step 2, there are 2 rubrics. So looking at how the candidate is creating and sustaining a safe and positive environment, as well as applying their UDL strategies, all to support their children in making progress in the math, content and practice, and the ALD learning goals. And in 1.6, how are they engaging children in play-based learning, observing, monitoring, and responding to them? Again, looking at the candidate is all the while supporting the children in making progress in their math content and practice and their ALD. Moving on to step 3, what to expect here. So this is where they reflect. They've planned a lot, they've taught it, and now they reflect on it. So they're reflecting on the effectiveness of their adaptations for their 3 focus children in making progress towards meeting the math learning goal, the content and practice. And the same thing, they're reflecting on the effectiveness of how those 3 focus children were making progress for the ALD learning goal. Historically, step three candidates will um, perhaps not go into depth about a reflection, not really kind of deeply go into maybe what worked and what didn't work. Maybe candidates are feeling like, well, if I say it didn't work, I'm not going to be scored as high. This is really looking for that authentic reflection. You know, we all know as teachers that nothing ever goes as planned. We are always learning after we've planned it and taught it, and what we maybe would have done differently or what we learned. Um, After we taught it, didn't go as we planned or we thought it would. And so this is that point where the candidate can go into that deep reflection. Look at the evidence table for step three. So they reflect again on the effectiveness that we just talked about, and they use the Part G template. This is a written narrative. They have up to 7 pages. And the prompts, again, are always in the guide as well as the templates. So they're in both places for candidates. There is one rubric in 1.7, and the candidate is reflecting on their activity as well as referring to evidence from steps 1 and or steps 2. So we want candidates also looking back on their planning, or they can look back on their teaching. So having some point of reference to look back on, like, maybe I should have planned this differently, or I planned this in step 1 and I'm so glad I did because it worked really well with my focus child too. So this is where they're kind of reflecting back on one of the steps of the cycle. Moving into step 4, this is the final step. Now they've taught it, they planned it, taught it, reflected on it. Now what are they going to do for future steps to really advance these children's math learning, their math content and practice, as well as their academic language development? Here's our evidence table. So, based on what you learned in 1, 2, and 3, steps 1, 2, and 3, describe what you will do for future activities for math. We're not talking about future activities for recess. So keep it to the math content. And we also want them thinking about how they taught their lesson, their activity, but also thinking about those 3 focus children too. They will use part H. This is the final template. It is a narrative, and they have a choice point again here on that final step where they can provide a written commentary, or they can again provide that verbal or that ASL response. And they have up to 6 minutes of video time if they prefer to just turn on their camera and provide that commentary about next steps and what they're going to do to really advance their kids' math and their academic language development. And there is one rubric in 1.8, and I'm sorry, in step 4, and just describing future steps. And of course, pointing back to evidence from steps 1, 2, and or 3. So we always put the and or in there if it can be 1, 2, or 3 things. So pay attention and call out to candidates as you kind of review those rubrics with them. Those and ors are true and ors. It does not have to be all 3. Just could be 1, but it is important that they're looking back. All right. Hopefully you like our handy dandy Venn diagram. I love a good Venn diagram. Sorry. But this is really talking about those state standards for PK-3, how they are utilizing these to create their math learning goal. So on the left, so depending on their clinical setting, they will be using the PTKLF for PK-TK, or if they're K3, they're using California Common Core. And on the right, we have alignment between the state standards where we have 8 math practice standards. So MP1 through MP8. So candidates will select one of those along with their content, and they'll create that learning goal in the middle, what children will be able to learn and do. And I think I have an example for you on the next slide. Yes. Okay. So here's a screenshot on the left of, this is from the PTKLF, or it's an example for PKTK, where we just selected a math content strand. Also in PTKLF, they're called strands. In Common Core, they're called standards. So you'll see throughout the assessment guide, we just say strands/standards because it just varies depending on their placement. So here's an example where we selected a strand 2.0, demonstrate understanding that adding or taking away one object changes the number in a small group of objects by exactly one. Now in the middle, here's from the PTKLF a screenshot of the 8 math practices. I think that I selected math practice 4, model with mathematics. So putting those together, here is an example. Children will demonstrate their understanding that adding one or taking away one object changes the quantity in a small group of objects by exactly one. That's the content. By using objects available in their environment to model their thinking. And that's the practice. So it is important. This is something that you could really elevate in your coursework is getting candidates familiar with these different state strands or standards, as well as the math practices as well, and how to kind of blend the two and to write a learning goal and to use that to write a learning goal. So that's definitely something that can be elevated in coursework. In our next slide, we have an example of an academic language learning goal because this is not based on a strand or standard. There is no ALD to point to. This is what the candidate, this is the, depending on their learning goal for the math content, this is the vocabulary, the syntax, the information that they need to learn and better access the content, the math content. So here's an example based on the math learning goal. So children will explain how adding or taking away one object changes the quantity by using simple terms and math-related terms like add, subtract, one more, one less. So that is a great use of academic language, and that would be something we'd want to see in the video clips as well. We want to see candidates using that language and getting the children to also be using that language. And that's one of the video clip prompts as well, is use of ALD. And here are some math cycle resources. They're also in the Google folder. I will also mention, as we went through the 4 steps, I mentioned that step 1 is like that pre-conference that you would have with a candidate before you would go observe them, and you'd talk about it. Talk about what they're planning to do, how they've differentiated, and all that, standards, content, practice, ALD, all of that. Step 2 is like the observation. You're sitting there, you're observing. Yes, this matches what they've planned for. Yes, I see how they're incorporating that. I remember that from their planning. Step 3 in the reflect is just like how you would have that post-conference, right? You'd meet afterwards, you'd talk about it, and you would talk about, the candidate would hopefully go into depth about how they felt about the lesson, what worked, what was effective, maybe what wasn't effective, what they would do differently. And then you would also be talking about that final step 4 and how they would apply everything to move forward. So that's just kind of a way to think about it. And hopefully this gives you enough information to go on right now so that you can start using this for your planning coursework for the coming year. Any questions? I'll just kind of pause for a minute before we move into the literacy cycle. Okay. All right. I'll hand it to you, Heather.
Thanks, Julie. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about Senate Bill 488, and I feel like everybody has at least had some familiarity with this due to the literacy certification process, and especially with PK-3. I know with your initial program approval, you all had to write to the new program standard and TPEs around literacy. So you all especially had like kind of an early preview of all of this compared to the other programs. But we'll do a little recap anyway, because I think it's important to understand where all of this came from. So Senate Bill 488 was the impetus to move away from RECA into a performance assessment in literacy. And what we did for CalTPA was work with a design team to redesign cycle 2 into the literacy cycle. And our pilot concluded about a year ago in spring 2024. And we just wrapped up our field test with all of our scoring, and we'll be presenting the results of our field test at the June commission meeting. And so in CalTPA, there are 2 parts to the performance assessment. It's a math cycle and a literacy cycle. The spring field test was particularly exciting because we had PK-3 programs that were approved to participate. In the pilot, we had multiple subject candidates in the early grade settings to kind of stand in for that population. But the field test was great because we had our actual PK-3 programs to participate. And so that was really exciting for us. And so we can go to the next slide. For the last 2 years, we've worked with our design team to redesign cycle 2. And we actually have 7 unique versions of the literacy cycle. So we have a version for multiple subject. We have a version for PK-3. And then our 5 ed specialist areas also each have a unique version. And on our design team, we have a pretty wide variety of experts that include multiple subject teachers, PK-3, early childhood experts. We have ed specialist experts that represent those 5 areas, as well as people who represent the English learner and bilingual community. So it's a pretty diverse group of literacy experts on that team. And in our field test, we had 29 PK-3 candidates. So we were really excited to be able to work with those programs and those candidates. And we'll be able to share those results with everybody in the next few weeks. So in Senate Bill 488, the commission was redirected to redevelop our performance assessment in order to assess candidate competence and literacy, especially around evidence-based methods of teaching foundational reading skills. And you'll see foundational reading skills are called out separately because it's called out separately in the legislation. They also discuss teaching foundational skills using tiered supports for students who have reading difficulties, English learners, and students with exceptional needs. It had to align with the ELA-ELD framework and the TPEs. And so prior to any of the performance assessment work taking place, there was a work group that was convened in order to write the program standards and TPEs for literacy. And so that was a separate group of people that did that work. The bill also went on to outline that the TPEs had to align to a very specific section of Ed Code. So it talks about the organized, systematic, explicit skills related to phonemic awareness, direct, systematic, explicit phonics, and decoding skills. So this section here is one of the reasons that candidates in the PK-3 credential area need to be working with students in TK and above, and it had to do with the developmental appropriateness of the literacy skills and the evidence-based methods that were being asked for within the legislation. Then there's also the strong literature, language, and comprehension component with the balance of oral and written language. These align with the cross-cutting themes from the ELA-ELD framework, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Diagnostic techniques that inform teaching and assessment, early intervention, and all of this takes place within the candidate's clinical practice. The assessment also needed to align with the assessment design standards that relate to reliability, validity, and the model sponsor support responsibilities. So the commission is the model sponsor for CalTPA, and we have responsibilities to maintain the assessment in order to ensure that it stays valid and reliable. It also needs to be ADA compliant and provide convincing evidence that the teacher candidate is able to demonstrate their knowledge, skills, and abilities related to what the assessment is being asked to measure. So in the ELA-ELD framework, the graphic that is up on the screen right now is called the Circles of Implementation. And we'll focus on the 5 smaller circles that are in the center of the graphic. And those are called the 5 cross-cutting themes from the ELA-ELD framework. Foundational reading skills is still one of the 5 cross-cutting themes, but it is spoken about separately because of the way Senate Bill 488 calls it out separately. That was really a big focus of the bill. And so the other 4 themes are effective expression, meaning making, language development, and content knowledge. And these 5 themes altogether represent the interconnected relationship among the strands within the ELA literacy standards for Common Core or within the strands of the PTKLF, which are reading, writing, speaking, and listening, and language. A really good example of this is within reading. Students can be asked to demonstrate foundational reading skills, or they might be asked to be doing some type of activity around comprehension, which really falls under meaning making. There are a lot of different things that relate to the cross-cutting themes that fall under the reading strand and that demonstrate that interconnected relationship of the cross-cutting themes. As you move further in on the circle, you also have the ELD standards. Those also align with the ELD strands that are in the PTKLF. And the ELD standards have 3 parts. It's interacting in meaningful ways, learning about how English works, and using foundational skills. What's really nice about the new redeveloped PTKLF is that there's a really strong alignment between the way they are written and the Common Core standards and ELD standards. So there's this really nice continuity amongst those documents now. Candidates are required to demonstrate ELD within their planning and their instruction, even if the students they're working with are not English learners. And again, that goes back to what's in the legislation about working with English learners and demonstrating that capacity. And so they're planning for ELD, and what they're doing is selecting an ELD strand or standard and learning goal. Integrated ELD is really using the ELD standards alongside another set of content standards, which in this case is the ELA literacy standards. And so the ELD standards are there to amplify the ELA literacy standards. And if you've spent some time in the ELD standard document, they actually list ELA literacy standards that correspond or correlate to those ELD standards. And so there's that really nice interrelationship between the two that candidates can use in order to help plan their learning segment lessons. And the same goes for the PTKLF. There's that really nice alignment between those 2 sets of standards or strands. So within a candidate's submission, they're going to plan for foundational reading skills and 1 or more of the additional themes, which again are meaning making, effective expression, language development, and content knowledge. And with foundational reading skills, for this age range that you all will be working with your candidates, I think it will be fairly easy for them to select one. With our candidates who work with the older range students, they tend to have a difficult time sometimes finding a skill that they can work on, but we do have some great resources on our next slide, particularly the one that's called the white paper for foundational reading skills. It's kind of the short title for it, but there's a great chart. If we could go to the next slide, that's linked in that document. And when you get a copy of the slides, you'll be able to click on it. But that resource guide has a great chart in there that talks about the specific skills that align with the Common Core state standards at each grade level that candidates can use as kind of a springboard. There's also some really, really great examples within the ELA ELD framework itself about what each theme looks like at each grade level. So if a candidate is maybe unsure of what language development looks like in a 3rd grade classroom, they can go straight to the framework. They can click on 3rd grade. They can go to the section on language development, and they can read all about what students would be expected to be able to do. And there's even some little vignette examples about what that might look like in a 3rd grade classroom. So that can be really helpful as well. So before we jump into the content of the cycle, we can pause for some questions.
This might not be a good question for right now, but we did the field test, and I was wondering if if there were going to be like a lot of changes from the field test, or the field what we did for the field test is pretty much what it's going to be.
We're in the process of wrapping up those edits, and I wouldn't say that there are changes, but nothing too
Okay.
intense. Yeah.
It's like the coordinators are just like chomping at the bit, like
Sure.
trying to find out, get all the like previews you can, but that's helpful. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of anything too severe off the top of my head right now, but we're just trying to kind of tidy everything up and take into account what we've heard so far. And then of course we have to wait to see what the commissioners direct us to do as well
Thank
at
you.
that month. Okay, well, let's go ahead and review what's in it. And again, all of this is awaiting approval at the June commission meeting. So this is all in draft form. We really do understand the need to have the materials as soon as possible. I just want to preface getting into this information with that. We're working with our technical contractor to get the watermark drafts out to you as soon as we can, but part of that does actually hinge on this assessment being officially approved at the June commission meeting. So we do appreciate your patience with us while we wait for that meeting. So in step 1 in plan, candidates are working with their cooperating teacher, with their faculty, and they're looking at whatever recent literacy assessments are available to them. It could be language profiles, literacy profiles, screenings, other contextual information, and they're looking at this information about the students in their clinical practice. And then they're selecting a focus student. And this focus student could be an English learner. It could be a student with a literacy disability. It could be someone who needs some additional support around meeting the standards or strands for their age or grade level, or maybe who needs some support around foundational reading skills. And you'll notice that there's a streamlined learning segment that includes integrated ELD. And the learning segment is where they give us an outline of their 3 to 5 literacy lessons. And again, they include ELD even if their group or focus student does not contain English learners. The whole cycle is aligned to the ELA ELD framework and other state documents like the California Dyslexia Guidelines. That we didn't actually review that specific part of the bill, but the Senate Bill 488 did call for the commission to incorporate the California Dyslexia Guidelines into the TPEs and the program standards and the assessment. So that is a part of this as well. There are streamlined questions related to formative and summative assessment. If you're familiar with the operational multiple subject version of Cycle 2, you'll notice that it looks a little bit different than that version. And there is the candidate choice regarding the use of self-assessment and rubrics. So this is our evidence table for step 1 for plan. So again, working with their faculty, their cooperating teacher, they're taking a look at those assessments for their clinical practice children. They're selecting a focus child, and then they're describing those 3 to 5 literacy activities and those formative and summative assessments. They select those foundational reading skills and the additional theme or themes from the ELA ELD framework. Each lesson has an ELA literacy learning goal and an ELD learning goal. And in step 1, they submit 4 pieces of evidence. They submit the contextual information. They submit their activity plan template. They submit their description of their assessments, and then they submit their blank copy of their summative assessment or the description. Sometimes they'll submit a description if the assessment is maybe not something that the student or the child is filling out, particularly with younger children. We see this where they'll say, this is what I'm going to be doing with the student to assess them or the child. And then they give us the rubric or the performance criteria that they're going to use to score that summative assessment. And we have two essential questions for our two rubrics in step one plan. And in rubric 2.1, candidates are assessed on their ability to leverage the children's assets, include assessments, and align their activities to progress the child's learning. And they also need to be able to include their learning goals that are developmentally appropriate for the children they're working with. In rubric 2.2, they are being assessed on their ability to apply findings from those assessments that they've looked at in order to plan for their foundational reading skills using a direct, systematic, and explicit approach. And then also on their ability to use that assessment information to plan for the additional themes using integrated ELD. And this should all be supporting the literacy and language development of the children they're working with. In step two, again, there is choice around the video clips that they are submitting. They get up to 20 minutes of video in the literacy cycle, and they can submit 1 to 4 video clips and allocate that however they would like. However, it best showcases their practice. They are asked to focus on foundational reading skills, the additional themes, formative assessment, adjusting instruction, and integrated ELD within their video. They do provide commentary again in this cycle, so they can explain what they're doing and why within their instructional choices. And they do have that opportunity to provide it in a written format or in a video format. So in step two, they're teaching and video recording all of their activities and selecting those 1 to 4 video clips and providing that commentary. And they submit 2 pieces of evidence, which is the videos and their commentary. We have 4 rubrics in step 2, and rubric 2.3 is really focusing in on their ability to provide instruction in foundational reading skills using that direct and explicit approach and supporting their children's progress toward the ELA literacy goals and ELD goals. 2.4 is focused around the additional themes and integrated ELD. 2.5 is focused around assessments to monitor learning and adjust instruction. And 2.6 is focused on using assessment results to provide specific actionable feedback to the children around what they are doing well or their misconceptions that they might have around literacy or language. Moving into step 3, candidates will take a look at the summative assessment. They're going to analyze the assessment and then reflect on the responses they've received from their group of children they've been working with and the focus child. And you'll notice if you've been working with the multiple subject version that there is some language that's been adjusted to focus on what the children understand, their gaps in knowledge or their misconceptions. And the candidate will submit their focus child's summative assessment response, the scored rubric or their performance criteria, and the feedback that they've provided to the child. So after they have engaged the child in the summative assessment, they're going to determine that child's progress or children's progress toward meeting the ELA literacy and ELD goals. They analyze those results. They provide them with that actionable feedback. They reflect on progress, but they also reflect on the effectiveness of their instruction. And that's going to be something that they write in their narrative in part I. And they submit the assessment, the rubric or performance criteria, and the feedback. And so we have 3 parts of evidence here: the assessment response and rubric or performance criteria, the feedback, and the reflection itself. Parts G and H can take a variety of formats. The assessment response could be a video, it could be an audio file, it could also be a scanned piece of written work from the child. We saw a lot of different formats. Same with the actionable feedback. Some of those were things that were written on students' papers. Some of them were videos of the candidate talking to the child. So again, lots of choices here on how they can submit evidence. And then moving into our final step, step 4, apply. Um, the candidate is going to work with the focus child to plan a follow-up activity, either a reteach or a extension, to support their literacy development. And they can include other children if they have similar needs to progress towards those ELA literacy and ELD goals. The reteach is really focused on targeted intervention or individualized strategies, and the extension is focused on that deepening or advancing learning. We have a streamlined activity description, and again, that option for the written or video commentary. And candidates are planning, again, based around the focus child. So they really need to narrow in on that specific child, and they'll implement that activity and video, record it, and provide their commentary. And we have 3 pieces of evidence here: the description of the follow-up activity, the video clip, and the commentary, either in written or video format. And in step 3, we have one rubric which focuses on the candidate being able to identify what the child is understanding, or their gaps in knowledge or misconceptions, the feedback they provided, and determine the effectiveness of their instruction. And in step 4, we have one rubric which has to do with how they are able to apply the analysis of their assessment results and plan and provide an explanation for and teach their follow-up activity. And what's important here is they also need to refer back to evidence from the previous 3 steps in order to support their decisions. We can go ahead and pause and take questions.
Good morning. This is Devin. I have a quick question just for clarification.
Yeah.
On the commentary, can this be a audio file only, or does it need to include the video?
Right now, the way the submission specifications are written is that it would be a video file.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions we can answer for anyone at this time? Okay, I think I'm turning it over to Marissa. And if anything else comes up as we're talking through the rest of the presentation, we're happy to pause again before we conclude today.
All right, thank you. So what TPEs are being measured? And in the PK-3 credential, there are some very specific TPEs, for math in 8 and literacy in 7. So they are different than in the multiple subjects credential, even though they are overlapping credentials. Let's go ahead and take. Right. So this is a draft TPE PK-3 matrix for the math cycle. And you can see that a lot of the math cycle is TPE 8 because, again, there is no set of TPEs for math in the multiple subjects credential. It's just found in the PK-3, which makes it very unique. And I think important because math and literacy are very important in having specific teacher performance expectations that candidates meet. Absolutely make this credential very strong indeed. We could take a look at the next. Yeah, very good. So this is the literacy cycle, and there are a lot of TPEs in literacy cycle in 7, simply because those are where they are focused. And the candidate option there, element 6, 7, 8, and 9, those are the second theme. So the candidate focuses on foundational skills, and then they focus on an additional theme. The candidate has the option to choose which theme. So there's no way that we can say absolutely it's 6, 7, 8, or 9 because the candidate has the option to be able to build their learning segment template in a way that includes any one of those elements. Take a look. So the fun part, how can I embed this in my program? How can I teach this? How can I engage candidates with this? How can I help them to see that this is an important part of what we're doing? Let's take a look at the next slide. And program standard 6 in this set. So one of the very unique things, and in my opinion, one of the most special things about PK-3 is they're the first credentialing program to have a standard for equity. And it's such an important piece and something that, we're struggling with and we miss a lot in many places, but the teacher performance assessments ask for candidates to leverage, to use kiddos' literacy and math knowledge, their cultural assets, their linguistic assets, and their interests. So assets and interests, what they come to school with. They are not an empty cup. They are filled with lots and lots of different things, but it's the teacher's job to know their students, to work with their kiddos, and to make sure that they are using what they know to bring them forward in their education. And so that is part of what is a major component of the teacher performance assessment and standard 6 within the within the PK-3 credential. So the program will provide multiple formative opportunities for candidates to prepare for TPA tasks and activities. Aligning assignments, aligning clinical practice are all excellent ways to do this, because the theory of action of teacher performance assessment is plan, teach and monitor, teach and assess, reflect and apply. That's not a unique thing to a teacher performance assessment. That's what we do in education. And a lot of times, unfortunately, candidates struggle in that reflect and apply part. They do a great plan, they can execute the activity, but that reflect and apply, where they look at what really happened, what went well, what didn't go so well, and move forward. So that's all to do with the theory of action in our program standard, and that candidates should be getting appropriate remediation, guidance, and support. When I was a program coordinator, I used to have a triangle around candidates, right? There's their faculty, their mentor, and their cooperating teacher. And whether they be an intern pathway resident or, student teaching in a 5th year, this triangle of support should be around them at all times. But if a candidate, it does not necessarily meet the expectations, that remediation and support should be there. And it's outlined in program standard 6 for PK-3. And go to the next slide, please. So embedding the math and literacy cycles into your program faculty and other educators like cooperating teachers, faculty mentors, these are folks that should be providing guidance for candidates through the 2 cycles using facilitation and coaching strategies. What that means is that we need to know, just like a teacher leverages the knowledge that their kiddos come in with to move them forward, as faculty and as mentors and as anyone that's supporting a candidate, is we need to know what the candidate knows and how to help them move forward. And every person needs to be coached differently. You can definitely have a class where you go through all the materials, but what one person says and what someone understands based on their own experience is going to be different. And truly, some folks come in and they are ready to, they have a lot of experience maybe in preschool, maybe they worked in a child development center while they were in college, and they might really have a solid understanding of that space, but might need more help with kinder, first, second, third, right? So truly, it's looking at your candidates, knowing what they come with, and coaching them in different ways. And we can go to the next slide. So reading candidate submissions, watching their videos, discussing their work with coaching strategies. This is a question I get a lot from folks, like, what is too much? What is too much support? And my answer to that is, when you find that the support is your answer, not the candidate's, then that's too much support, right? But if a candidate comes to you with a question, you can't say, "Oh no, this is a test. This is a test. It's all you," right? That's not how this performance assessment is designed. It's designed to be done in support. And so those of you that have completed a master's thesis project, doctorate, dissertation, where you work with a chair or an advisor and you meet with them and you make iterative changes to your work to come up with something that's tremendous, and you look back at it and you read it and you're like, my goodness, I don't know who wrote this because it wasn't me. That is what we're looking for. That's the kind of support that candidates should be receiving through a teacher performance assessment. It's not, it's, my work for my university experience, that's not my advisor's work. It was my work. But without my advisor guiding me, helping me, and giving me support along the way, I would never have gotten there. So if you think about it in that way, that's that's what we're looking for when we talk about reading candidate submissions, watching videos, discussing work, and also putting candidates together to look at each other's work, using self-assessment. Look at those rubrics, read the rubrics together in class, turn those rubric constructs into questions. Does this, cycle one, does your learning goal include a math standard or strand and a practice? If so, where is it? Put a circle around the standard or strand and put a box around the practice. Let's identify it. Let's clearly identify it. And if we talk about those learning goals, right? One is what we're going to learn about, and the other, the ALD, is how we're going to communicate about it. What kind of words are we going to need to use? What kind of language are we going to need to have? How are kiddos going to communicate? So how will they show that they know what they know, right? So that's what we think about when we look at those goals. And using rubrics in coursework to help guide discussion of effective teaching practices and providing multiple opportunities for candidates to peer review and provide feedback are important. I was a teacher, classroom teacher for 17 years before I went to university level work, and I did that for about 5 years before coming to the commission. And when I look at that, plan, teach and assess, reflect, apply, that's the work of teaching. That's absolutely the work of teaching. And so, oh, sorry, Christy, got a quick question.
Sorry, I just was gonna say that that because is this LPA, is this specific to is this like program wide? So I'm the coordinator for we have a huge program. So I do all of the TPAs and LPAs in the program. Hearing that there are 7 special ed iterations, I was like, oh, or how five was it 5? 5, 7.
5 special education, PK-3, and multiple subjects. So there are
Yeah.
7 iterations of the literacy performance assessment.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
correct.
so I do that plus the CalTPA and all of that. So, but one of the things that we do massive amounts of support in our program. But one thing that we haven't been doing just because of the acceptable supports is like basically I don't proofread their submissions. So they get tons of feedback, but it seemed to me before that in acceptable supports, it was very clear about like you're not allowed to give them like edits, proofread, things like that. This seems different to me now. So are we saying now that that is okay? Because for me, I'm very much about gradual release, which is like I'm going to support you up to the finish line, but you need to cross it on your own because we need to know that you can demonstrate those independent skills in the classroom without me saying, if you don't know what direct instruction is, we just had this with one of our PK-3 submissions. If you don't know what direct instruction is, what we did was we then collaborated with the field supervisor and had those conversations. And then ultimately that candidate was able to film videos that did have direct instruction in them, but she wasn't sure at the time why we were saying she wasn't doing direct instruction. So that totally makes sense to me. So if that's what you're talking about, I can totally but that was
Yeah.
but that was a PK-3 pilot where I was looking at their work. And so I guess the question is like am I as the CalTPA coordinator being asked now to look at all of their submissions?
So given that you have a large program, you're going to be directing faculty to support candidates as well. You can look at their submissions.
Okay.
What my I I know this is going to sound bad, but I didn't want to have to like read individual submissions and people want me to edit for grammar or things of that nature. That's absolutely no, no, no.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But when someone, if you have a one-on-one advising meeting with someone and they are asking you very specific questions and you're seeing a space where they need additional support, providing them with resources for that additional support, like you did with direct instruction, is absolutely acceptable because that's what we're doing. We're moving teachers forward. One place that I used to see a lot of candidates struggle was embedded ELD. They
Yeah,
had no understanding of what English language development was. They thought, oh, well, I'll just have them do the think, pair, share, and that's ELD.
yeah,
And I was like, well, that's one strategy, but here are several resources where you can review some excellent strategies for English language development, and you can look through and see what the goal of your lesson is and how you want the kiddos to communicate, and then you can use something like that is absolutely the support that we're asking for folks to do. We don't want you to say, oh, you need to do embedded ELD. Here, do this one strategy and you'll be perfect, right? That's not what we want because that's not going to help them learn either way because giving someone the answer, it's quick. It doesn't necessarily help them develop as a teacher. So thank you for your examples and what we're doing. Yes, absolutely. We're, looking at someone's submission, having them look at each other's submissions, if they need help with like standard English or with editing and stuff, sending them to a writing center on campus if you have that available to you, or even other folks that are able to do some of that work. That's always helpful. Yes, thank you.
thank you. That's really helpful.
Mhm. Okay, we can probably go to the next slide. So, providing clarity about the expectations for practice, like we were just talking about, opportunities for candidates to apply and refine their responses. Candidates should be doing this cycle in observations, in their formal observations. They should be going through, and really getting a chance to reflect in their clinical practice. And so they will be doing these practice. And one thing that I used to do in my program is I used to have candidates film themselves for all 12 of their formal observations each year. And there were specific TPEs they were supposed to be hitting on in each of those observations. And I would ask them to make a clip and tell me how they demonstrated that TPE. And it was a way for them to not only practice with the technology, but also understand about how to, pull a clip from something, and also to justify how they made these TPEs, how they demonstrated them. And any TPEs that they did not demonstrate so clearly, we made sure to keep track of that because that could be put into their individual development plan, their IDP, that could inform induction, their ILP. I know we got all these letters, right? But so that way they use the teacher performance assessment as one measure, right? Because it's only one measure. You have 35 to 38 units, you have 600 hours of clinical practice, different settings, all these other requirements. The teacher performance assessment is just one part, right? But it's an important and it's a powerful part that can really help to shape what goes forward. Encouraging candidates to use the glossary. What I say and what you understand are completely different things sometimes, depending upon our experiences. And so making sure that you have a common language that everyone is speaking is important in education. Educational terms have different meanings in different spaces. And I when I was teaching 8th grade, I would talk about, a point in math is different than a point in an argument than me pointing at something. And so based on that person's experience, background information, I had a lot of folks that came to teaching from other worlds, from MBAs, from being in different spaces, especially my single subject folks who had been like a biology major and had only done biology, but doing biology is different than teaching biology. And so that was important with that glossary and making sure we aligned the language. And then again, encouraging candidates to use professional writing. The TPA, if you look at all the rubrics, nothing in there says professional writing. Nothing in there says spell everything right or put capitals. But do remember that these assessors folks who are screening these and reading these and awarding, identifying the evidence, they are teachers, and teachers like complete sentences. And these are a professional portfolio of knowledge. And so encouraging that professional writing, checking spelling. I was an English teacher. Please put a capital at the beginning and a period at the end, or whatever endpoint you're going to use. And do utilize those writing supports. There are students who they themselves are English learners and are struggling at certain points with writing. And so identifying those candidates, making sure to point them to either in-person or online supports will definitely help them the earlier they get into it. So that way they're not at the end with this big thing that needs to be adjusted. Next slide. So this was a great resource that was provided to folks in the pilot, and I believe we have it in the resource guide. But at the beginning of the semester, I used to have the candidates just like close their eyes and imagine what it would feel like when they submitted their teacher performance assessment and they got their score report and they passed. How would you feel? What would you do? How would your celebration be for yourself? Just to imagine that. Okay, well, how do we get there from here? Using a backwards map and putting the end game of passing this assessment by recognizing we have to submit it by this date to get a score by this date. And so if I want to submit it by this date, I want to make sure I upload it 2 days before. And so if I need to upload it, then what documents do I need to have in order? And if I need to film, I need to look at the school calendar and make sure I'm not trying to film during spring break or when testing is happening. So there's all kinds of moving parts for candidates. So helping them by looking at a backwards map and then looking at these different calendars, and then you have those candidates who would have, like me, I have 2 children. I have to, when's baseball, when's this, when's that, and I have to, put all these things together. So this is a sample that you can provide to candidates or help build into a syllabus. So the candidates can move things along, bit by bit. I had a math teacher he was a friend of mine. He used to say, "Bit by bit, math is a cinch." So truly, if you break these things down into something smaller, it can be a lot more helpful. And depending upon your semester, you can move these around. And I think this 6-week one is designed to support the LPA because that one's has a lot more to it because of the multiple lessons, and whereas the math performance assessment is one lesson, so it can be done a little bit quicker. Next slide, please. Okay, so required supports. Providing candidates with access to handbooks and other explanatory materials. Housing these items in a Canvas shell or in whatever your LMS is, and giving candidates access, especially early, even before they have to do their teacher performance assessment, is always helpful. Make sure that they're looking at the right version. Sometimes if they just do like a Google search and find stuff, it might be older versions, and we don't want folks using, accessing the wrong materials. Explaining the tasks and rubrics, going through and talking about them and understand. I had a candidate who misunderstood the rubric, thought that if I do most of the stuff in a level 3, I'll get like a 2.8. Right? Well, if they don't understand that's an analytic rubric, and if they don't do everything in a level 3, then it's a 2. And just that simple misunderstanding could have cost that candidate a passing score. And so just explaining the structure of things, explaining the essential question, how the essential question is broken down into the level 3, and that a level 3 meets competency. A level 4 is above, and a level 5 is above and beyond. So recognizing that level 3 is where we start, and then we move to a level 2 if we're missing something, and we move to a level 4 if we see everything. So just recognizing that. Engaging candidates' informative experiences with the TPA. So looking at all of these different pieces, where in your program are candidates being taught to plan? Where are they being taught to teach and monitor? Where are they being taught to reflect, and where are they taught to be able to look at those reflections and apply? All those spaces are in your programs. How can you align the TPA? How can you refer back to that when you're in those TPA cycles? And providing candidates who are not successful with the assessment additional focused support, right? So if you get a candidate and they don't meet the secondary passing standard for one reason or another, and you see that they maybe struggled in one particular area, it's targeted support in that one area, so that way the candidate can move forward. And perhaps even looking at that as an item for their IDP if they need additional support, maybe with reflecting or applying. And that can be something that the induction folks take up with this candidate to continue their growth over time. Next slide, please. Perfect. Thank you. Acceptable supports. These are all the good things. So those are the things you have to do. These are all the things that you can do. Guiding discussions about the TPA tasks and scoring rubrics. One thing that I did when I was faculty is I would make videos. I would of whatever template and whatever step we were going to cover, and I would do direct, like a video with a screen, just my voice, because my hair was always like this, and so I didn't want my picture to be there. But I would just talk over the video, the thing we're going to cover in class, and I'd assign it as something to do before class, so they had to listen to it. And I'd make a video just like I was talking. If I sneezed and said, excuse me. I didn't pause it and go back and edit it because that takes a lot of time. But you want to make sure that the information that is going out to candidates is consistent. But also, I would make those videos not only for the candidates, but for the mentors. Because that's what I would hear cooperating teachers say all the time. Well, I didn't have to do a TPA. I have no idea what this thing is. But I would tell them, I said, well, do you plan? Oh, yeah. Do you teach and monitor the students while you're doing that? Well, absolutely. Do you reflect on what you did? Yes. And do you learn from that and do something different next time? Well, yeah, that's what teaching is. Well, then you absolutely can support someone through a teaching performance assessment because you absolutely do these things. Now let's talk about the specifics. Here's some videos, 2-minute videos, short things that I can give you so you can support your candidate. So, and I used to include that as part of like the 10-hour yearly training. I would send out those videos to folks, and a lot of times they just listen to them in the background, and if they ever, needed more specific information, they had that as an asynchronous support. They don't have to call me or email me if they have questions. Using TPA scoring rubrics on assignments, right? Other than the candidate responses, those rubrics are already made for you. You could definitely utilize them for a clinical practice observation, or in a class where a candidate is planning a mini unit of study. They're already there. Asking probing questions, right? Yeah, Christy said that she saw a candidate that didn't understand direct instruction, and they confuse that a lot with direct, systematic, and explicit, and then direct instruction, right? And they're similar words, but that's a glossary thing. You see a spot where someone needs support. Here we go. Here's some additional resources so that way you can get to the answer, because that's how we learn. I'm assisting candidates in understanding how to use electronic platforms, models, and we often get the question about AI here in this space when talking about electronic platforms. We're talking specifically about the ePortfolio system, but at this time, the commission does not have an official stance on AI and programs that are generative of materials. One thing I was taught in my statistics class when we were going through is if you put garbage into a system, you'll get garbage out. And so we had a program coordinator who talked about human in, human out, and using different tools. So make sure that you address this. Each program, we defer back to programs policies on the use of AI. But truly, it's human in, human out, and we need to know these answers, not just get through an assessment. And if we frame it in that we are teaching monitoring we're planning, teaching and monitoring, reflecting and applying. Those are all human things that we are doing. And arranging technical assistance for the video portion of the assessment. We used to have candidates when I was at UC, we would have student assistants that were employed by our program that would come and help folks with the video portion if they were having any kind of issues. There are also instructions within the assessment guide and on the website for candidates if they are having issues with the video portion of the assessment. Talk about the unacceptable support. There you go. Editing their official materials prior to submission. That's not what we do. And when we say editing, it's not just, looking at someone saying, "Oh, this sentence right here is not complete. Maybe you need to think about that." I mean, it's going in and actually putting it's your knowledge, your information on their submission. They need to do their own work. Providing specific critique of candidate responses that indicates alternative responses. So instead of doing this, you should do this. That's what that means, right? Saying, wow, looking at your ELD standards, what is your goal here? And then listening to the candidate and recognizing that there might be spaces for them to grow in that. Well, if you're wanting kiddos to do this, then here are some strategies that might be able to help you. Why don't you look at these and think about this part here, because it definitely needs some help. We need to make sure that we're embedding these ELD strategies and moving kiddos forward. Telling candidates which video clips to select for their submission. They need to watch their own videos. They need to see where they demonstrated their best work, and their clips. There's a lot of flexibility around clips. There have been a lot of changes around how we are going to be accepting clips coming in the next academic year with the different lengths of video and such. So candidates do have a lot of choice points around this. And uploading a candidate's response, right? I had a candidate once tell me, "I'm too busy. Well, you need to upload my stuff. Here's my login." I was like, "Yeah, no, buddy, I'm pretty busy too." And it's unacceptable support. They need to go ahead and log in, create their own profiles, and get in there. And then also um, just be mindful and make sure you remind them that these are people's children, that their parents have signed permission for them to be recorded. They don't sign that permission slip with the expectation of seeing it on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube. We have to protect people's privacy, and especially all children, but I saw this a lot with children with special needs and such. You want to make sure that their video entries or written responses, they don't end up somewhere that we don't expect them to be, for sale or anything like that, because they need to protect the privacy of folks that they capture in their videos. Okay. All right. Any questions about anything up until this point?
Okay, I just have to be annoying and ask one more time. So the second bullet point on the previous slide, I have it pulled up, so you don't have to. I took a screenshot. Just
Hey.
want to refer back to it, but so unacceptable supports, providing specific critique of candidate responses that indicates alternative. Thank you. So providing specific critique of candidate responses. So to me, looking at candidates' materials and telling them what's working, what's not working, how does that, it just seems like a very gray area for me, like a very fine line between me, like I almost felt with the field test for the PK-3 field test, I was giving them too much because I was able to look at their stuff, and I was basically saying it was good. It was a good jumping off point. And everything that we do in our program for the CalTPA, because I came from a background of teaching and curriculum and instruction and coaching. So I always say, like, this is not about just you taking a test. This is about this helping you be a better teacher so that you do your TPA and you demonstrate the TPEs and you are more prepared to enter the classroom and support your students. So we make everything a teachable moment when it comes to the TPA or the LPA. Nothing's just about the test. But I just feel like that's such a gray area of that line of like, if I have to tell you, like you have a field supervisor and you're in a field placement, if I have to tell you that you are exposing student vulnerabilities, like if you don't know that until you fail a TPA, then I don't know. It's very tricky for me, that one. So I don't want to take too much time, but I just wanted to ask again, like, where's that line?
No, absolutely. And that is a pinch point for more than just you. It is a challenge for a lot of faculty and coordinators. And so what and for me, the biggest thing is telling someone, no, this is wrong. Here's what you do instead. You'll pass if you do this.
Oh yeah, no.
That's to me, that is the unacceptable specific critique. You're wrong. This is not good. But if you notice in a submission that a candidate has a fundamental misunderstanding of a
Yeah.
concept, wow, what an opportunity to learn. And
Yeah.
that is exactly but if you tell them no, that's wrong. What are you doing here?
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
right? And so truly I feel like as educators, we have that voice inside of us that we can look to. And if you said if this is your submission, not their submission, then that's the unacceptable piece. But if it's their submission with your support, then that's absolutely what it's
Okay.
intended to be.
All right.
Is that
Yeah, thank you.
okay? Thank you for that. I appreciate your conversation. This is like I said, it's a pinch point for a lot of folks. And so thank you for voicing that. All right. I think I'm turning it back over to Julie.
Okay. Thank you, Marissa. It never gets old to hear Marissa present that section. I always learn something. I just love it. Okay, so we want to kind of quickly review what's on the horizon, as well as some program supports, because this is not the last time we're coming together. This is just the introduction and the very beginning of our work together, and we want to be of support to you. So as we look at the next slide, we commission staff have some very important next steps to finalize and get these assessments out and ready for you. So we're going to be presenting, if you're curious or want to log in and watch or provide a public comment, you are welcome to do so for the upcoming June meeting. We are going to be presenting the data and the full results from the LPA, the Literacy Performance Assessment, as well as the results from the extended math cycle field test for PK-3 and DHH. So those will both be at the June meeting, and the commission will then provide us with their next steps and become operational, and these will go operational as of August. So if we look at our next slide, what you probably all want to take out your phone and take a picture of is when will these materials be available to you? So the guides, the templates, the rubrics, candidates can register and download these math and literacy cycles as of August 26th. However, we will provide the watermark drafts to you, the programs, at an earlier date. I can't give you the exact date because there's some gray area between what the commission provides as our next steps and launching this on the website and making revisions, but we will get these out to you as soon as possible in a watermark draft before the August 26th date. So we just want to put that out there. If you are, as you are doing your program planning and hopefully utilizing some of those documents in the resource folder, like the sample backwards planning documents, that will help you kind of map out how you want to kind of launch into the year with your PK-3 candidates. Kimberly asked, can vouchers be purchased before 8/26? That's a great question. Xavier is here from Evaluation Systems. I'm not sure if you know the answer to this or not.
Yeah, apologize, Julie and Kimberly. I'm not entirely sure. We had a similar question yesterday, and there was a
Oh,
link that Lori had put in the chat. I don't have access to that chat from yesterday. So if we have that, it might be posted to that page.
Okay. So Kimberly, yes, we're not sure if vouchers can be purchased through ES before the 8/26 date. But we'll try to put something into the PowerPoint before we put it in the Google folder for you. So thank you for that question. We do have some upcoming meetings. Oh, Kimberly says, I'm familiar with the link, curious about the timeline for this new exam. Thanks. Yeah, you bet. Yeah. So yes, we've got our timeline. So we will meet again. Hopefully you will be joining us on August 13th. We will have a special new materials preview for the 25-26 items on August 13th just for PK-3. This will be posted in PSD News tomorrow. However, I can grab the link and I'll put it in the chat in just a moment. And then, as Heather mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, selecting if you are going to be selecting a new program coordinator to support your PK-3 program, or if you are a brand new program and you don't have a program coordinator at all, this is for new program coordinators. We'll have this orientation on September 9th, just a half-day version. That will probably be in PSD News the month prior. So probably in August, be on the lookout for that registration link. And as well, we have some digging deeper topics to talk about in the fall. This is a great time for us to come together as a CalTPA community across all assessments and just talk about different themes that we're seeing, different patterns and trends, and to hear from your colleagues. So we'll have one each month. These are just the fall dates, September, October, and November, where we will begin coming together and we'll talk about supports, coaching, use of video, commentary, and things like that. So again, always keep an eye out in PSD News. That's where we like to put those registration links for you. So we will be coming together very soon. Again, look forward to seeing you all on August 13th.
And when we come back in the fall, we will be resuming our office hours. So we're on a little summer pause right now, but starting the week of September 8th, program office hours will start up again. And CalTPA, which will include the PK-3 programs, will be taking place on the first and third Fridays from 9:30 to 10 a.m. And then Ed Specialist program office hours will follow directly on the heels of that from 10 to 10:30. So if you have your questions, you can come visit us then. And then for all candidates, office hours will take place on Wednesdays at 4:15. We do also have our listservs that you can sign up for when you get our slide deck in the Google folder. You can click on any of these to sign up to get our updates that we push out periodically for our different performance assessment areas. So we have APA, we have literacy, we have TPA, and we have Ed Specialist. And then finally, we just have our email addresses that you can contact us. If you have policy questions, you can contact the TPA inbox, or for technical questions, you can reach out to Evaluation Systems. Thank you for being here with us today. We know we might see some of you later on today at our coordinator meeting.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
I'm sorry to be such a pain, everybody. I have one more question.
Yeah.
It's actually about, okay, so I am, for some reason, I'm not getting the emails that come from, I'm getting the CalTPA program emails from Pearson, and I get PSD News, but for some reason, I'm not getting the CalTPA support, the CalTPA program emails that come from the CTC CalTPA for whatever reason. And I did email that email yesterday, and I just said, could you please add me? I don't know why, but I get that. I get typically several people in our program get it, but for some reason, the coordinator doesn't get it. So everybody else they just forward them to me. But for some reason, I'm still not getting that one particular email.
Oh, and it's from CalTPA.
It's the one that's CalTPA.
Is it a listserv or through the commission or from?
It's the CalTPA at ctc.ca.gov.
That one you have to sign up for. So I just put
Yeah.
the link in the chat. And
Okay,
if
thank you.
you sign up for it, it will come to you whenever an update is pushed out.
Okay, perfect. Because I thought I just
Yeah.
did that one to get on. It's very it's a whole thing because I was coordinating at two universities, so I was getting
Okay.
PSD news at one of them, but I wasn't getting PSD news at the other one, so I just had to sign up. It's a whole